Tisch is here. He is president of Argyle Communications. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what we're talking about is the fact that obviously Pearson Airport and airports across the country and across North America had to shut down. So many people have been put out by all of this. But now it's left a very bad taste in people's mouths as far as airlines and airports. So what do both of those do as a way to turn around their PR?
Yeah. Well, I think big picture, all research I've seen suggests that reputation management, not just in the airline industry, but in any customer service organization, depends on a few things. One, having a really crystal clear sense within your organization, including every employee, of your values. And when it comes to airlines, I think, customer safety and customer experience have to be number one and number two. Secondly, I think a culture of listening and engagement that really, really works, so you're engaged with your customers and you understand risks and opportunities. And third, a sense of responsibility, right? Responsibility that those at the highest levels of the organization are taking it seriously and are going to try to use every occasion like this as an opportunity to learn.
So this costs money, Dan, and airlines are cash-strapped, and a lot of them don't want to spend it, and they look at their competition and say, well, they're not spending it. Yeah. People have to fly anyway. It's not like they can go anywhere.
Well, sure, but the reality is people don't compare, when people think of their experience on an airline, they don't compare it just to other airlines. They compare it to all sorts of good customer service experiences they might have everywhere else. And I think for a smart airline, the opportunity now is a bit of differentiation, right? It's, okay, we know this affected everybody, but we're going to do something that's just a little different, right? And so I'd really encourage them to invest in training and, in that communication of customer service values to staff. And I'd also encourage them to do the sort of stuff that WestJet has done really well, for example, and that's build your ongoing customer service brand. Because if people think, yeah, this affects everybody, and this was a really bad situation, and yes, I'm not happy with this airline, they're more likely to see it as a speed bump rather than the stop sign, if they say, well, these guys are generally pretty good, right? So, and that's in some ways, in these situations, no one's going to say, well, I'm really happy, but they might say, well, this airline's better than most. To give you a really good example of responsibility, there was a story not long ago about Porter's CEO personally calling somebody who'd sent an email, like within half an hour after that email arrived. And you can imagine what an impact that had, regardless of whether it solves the customer's problem, right? It's just and if that sort of customer service mentality could be spread to every staff member effectively, where you're showing empathy, you're showing motive, and you're very quickly going into a solution orientation in that moment, I think that's when communications and customer service and marketing all come together.
That's exactly it, because a lot of people, will say, well, it costs money to do customer service, but sometimes it's those little things that make a difference. And
Symbolism.
For me, it seems like airlines have such blinders when it comes to this. I'm especially in the social media world, I'm thinking about United Airlines and breaking that one person's guitar and not apologizing.
And that guy was active on social media last night about all this.
Right.
So.
And, and I always think for a situation like this, even if somebody handed out cookies, which cost like very little money, it would make such a difference. Why do you think airlines seem to always just say, sorry, our hands are tied?
Yeah, well, I think part of the challenge is they're very complex organizations, right? And I think part of the role for professional communicators, perhaps this is a little plug for our industry, but I think they really have to step up and take responsibility and be kind of the center of collaboration, because you've got so many people touching customers. You have marketing, you have communications, you have customer service, right? And of course, around all of this is operations, right? But an operational failure is compounded by a communications failure. An operations failure is mitigated by a communication success. So can you somehow get everybody working together so that there's kind of a common vision and a common approach to communication?
Here's my take, Dan, on why this happens. I think it's because there really isn't a brand loyalty, and people will go out, shop for the lowest price. And I think that the airlines know this, and I think they go, well, as long as we have good advertising for sales, they'll buy the ticket anyways. And then the rest, we've got delays, we've got cancellations. People have to fly anyways, to your point. And so they'll just look for the cheapest flight. This is what I'm thinking. Does that make any sense?
Well, I think, though, it is a very, that does make some sense, but I think an airline that bases its communications or customer service strategy on that is not going to do really well, right? You know, I think ultimately you look at where WestJet and Porter, for instance, have done well, or where Air Canada at its best does well, because it's a larger organization and tougher to maintain that sense of discipline. I think they do try to differentiate themselves. Part of the problem, I think, sometimes comes from a lack of consistency. So to give you an example, you mentioned social media. Last year I was on a plane and it was a long delay. It was one of these, we're sitting on the tarmac for an hour, nobody's communicated with us. I won't say which airline, you know. So I then do what a lot of people are now doing, and that's I get on my Twitter account, even though I'm in the plane, you know, but it's on the ground, so no one's complaining. And I tweet, you know, hey, airline, you know, we don't know when we're going to leave, I've got a connection to catch. I'm in communication now all of a sudden with people on Twitter, and they're helping to solve my problem. They're saying, no problem, we'll book you on the next one. They actually put me on first class. They didn't have to do that. Well, they did have to, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten a seat on my connection. But it exceeded my expectations. But my observation was, and I actually tweeted this, you know, you really should find some way so that what you know and what you're able to do is matched by what those on the plane, the flight attendants, are able to communicate.
And these companies are getting better at monitoring the social media and being able, because it's not just people, customer service reps on the ground at the airport, it's the social media is a big venue for that.
It is, and I think the airlines are almost universally getting really good at social media because that's where customers go. But the problem is when an airline isn't integrated between its different communications channels, the different ways it reaches the customer, or frankly when the social media people have no power to do anything. Because that happens too, where they'll just be really nice, you know, buddies, and you know, oh, we're really sorry about the problem you're having. You know, you know, why don't you go have a cookie, right?
Right.
You know, as opposed to solving the problem. And what differentiated this airline that I was on that day, in a good way, was they were able to actually empowered to get on and make a reservation for me, right? But they were not so good at communicating that to those on the plane who, for whatever reason, weren't on Twitter or weren't able to
because they didn't get to hold the, you know, social media gun to their head.
Right.
Which is what happens now across the board. It's like, that's it. Like a company, it would be nice to think that they're just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They don't want to be shamed publicly. But so, you know, whatever gets the job done.
It's a phone. You got to answer the social phone.
That's right. Dan Tisch, he is the president of Argyle Communications. Thanks for coming in this morning.
My pleasure.